Sometimes if you're in the dark forest, you might as well just groove out. So, what's nice about that is that they go through everyone has their solo. They're all in a hole and they're digging it deeper. We're all in the same situation. You know, we might have our individual ways of moving through it, but we're all in the same situation. We all have this dark forest, this space of being lost, this space of no way out, this kind of catch-22. Like she says, like, well, I was told if I just kept digging, I'd get to the top, but I keep digging and now I can't stop, and why am I not at the top? That's what I was told, right? So we all have these situations in our life, right? These cycles. In Buddhism, it's called samsara, the cycle of suffering that we go through, right? So let's just take a moment and close your eyes for a moment. And take yourself back to the dark forest. to the image. Place yourself back in the image. And then notice for yourself how this consciousness, this quality of consciousness of being in the dark forest, how this plays out for you through your day. How it affects and indeed shapes every action of your day. And just muse on that for a minute or two. And seeing as you muse on this, if you can leave the space open enough not to judge your choices one way or the other, but just to notice them. To notice how this quality, this space, forms your actions, your external actions. Then just write down one, or if you want to write down a few things that you noticed from that. Again, in a way that's meaningful for you. And then if you wrote down more than one thing, just choose one that you want to work with right now, and close your eyes again and go into this thing and notice what your relationship to it is. So again, for the moment, trying to leave some space open, so without the judging it one way or the other, to just have a sense of what your quality of relationship is with this action or entity that you wrote down. What's the space of your dialogue with it? Is there any dialogue, or is it just habits? Is it something that you're so intensely intimate with you can't imagine not being intensely intimate with it? Or how long have you been with it? And when you are ready, write down maybe 1 to 3 statements about your relationship with this thing. And then to close your eyes one more time and consider in light of what you have just begun to discover about your relationship to this particular action or entity that you enact in your life, which is directly related like a heartbeat to the dark forest. How might you envision your relationship growing in a way that is supportive for you in your path? Again, without judgment, but discerning how you would like to move forward in this relationship to this entity, action, being. Bringing a vision to yourself here, opening the space of inner vision. It's like you're telling the future here, you're seeing into the future of what's possible. And trust what comes to you, but take a moment here to really be with it. To let yourself fall into what it would be if that relationship was embodied in the way you're dreaming on, envisioning. And then for yourself, just write a little prayer or wish or hope for this relationship, like a blessing for this relationship. Simple blessing. And before we move on, if anyone feels so moved to offer their blessing, we'll make a little space for that. Offering it to yourself in voice and also to others.
I pray to my life. I pray to my life, my God, my teacher, that she or he may guide me towards the direction in which I can discover the courage for myself.
Thank you.
Why do I stumble when it comes to vision and blessings? Is it because I am so accustomed to being, living in the darkness, that the light temporarily blinds and stuns me?
I just want to get to my Lama. She is my salvation. She fills me up and holds me tight. I just want to be with my Lama, to walk with no anger, and I offer it to her. My only thing I hold on with fear, I give it to her because it's all I have.
to wash her feet with my tears and a million blessings she gives me back.
Arms embrace the darkness. Heart to
May I and my fear become best friends, each challenging and accepting the other.
Hmm.
Take up the space. Expand your field of consciousness to be the vast entirety of the landscape that encompasses the dark forest. Become the heart of it.
May no walls be needed.
One more time, Jed, sorry.
May no walls be needed.
Mm. So thank you for blessing us and the ones that are spoken and unspoken. We have them all together, and again to say, because I need to say it for myself, to notice that everyone in here knows what to do. I know what to do. You know what to do. Everyone knows how to be in relationship to themselves. So often we forget that. But it's very clear. So I want to read you a little something. This was written by the artist whose image we'll look at in a moment. And this is another very striking offering in relationship to the dark forest, just another way to address it, this state of consciousness that we have, are, one would say. He says, I went along the road with two friends. The sun set, and suddenly the sky became blood, and I felt the breath of sadness. I stopped, leaned against the fence, deathly tired. Clouds over the fjord dripped, reeking with blood. My friends went on, but I just stood trembling with an open wound in my breast, trembling with anxiety. I heard a huge, extraordinary scream pass through nature. So if you open your lighter red card, you'll see this image. So this is, of course, The Scream by Edvard Munch, and probably in the top 5 most recognized pieces of art, all right? And he made many versions of this throughout his life. And it really, this piece has really become a sort of emblem or symbol for modern anxiety, for the anxiety of modernity. And came out of this very direct experience where he dropped so fully into the dark forest. Something that is felt so deeply like this, this experience, this consciousness, it's a certain gift to us when someone feels this so completely and expresses it in some way or another, in a way that is not violent, but in a way that is open for it to be seen. It allows us to begin to touch base or connect with it in our own self. I was telling David, one of the reasons why I chose this image, and I often am very moved by this image, is not so much the image, although the image is moving, but because my brother, who's quite mentally ill, would carry this around, and he had a T-shirt, and he would wear the T-shirt like for years. He wore the T-shirt, and I thought, and this image was like he would save himself by being able to look at this image and know that someone else was also had encountered what he was encountering, this madness in his own mind. So even though everyone in this room and everyone in the whole universe, every sentient being, our suffering is particular, but ultimately we share it. So if it's of any comfort, again, we're not alone, right? And we can look for what the gift it is that it offers us. This extraordinary sensitivity that this artist had to this moment, to one, being able to be open to it, and then to express it somehow, to move it forward in his life in a way that was meaningful for himself and others, is a beautiful model, and is a model of compassion. How we work with the dark forest defines our compassion, how we enact our compassion in the world. Compassion, suffering with, compassion is a word that it's, to me, when I think of compassion often, and I don't know what might come up for you, but often it comes up like doing good things. If I'm compassionate, I'm a really nice person and I'm really caring for other people. And that's lovely to enact, of course, and to experience and important. But I've been starting to think of compassion just as sensitivity, hypersensitivity, like your ability to be sensitive within your own being is your ability to be compassionate. So I offer that to you. How sensitive are we, and what are the things that keep us numb? There's so much that numbs us out. And so if you haven't already, if you turn the card over, there's this quote here, and I'll read it out loud, and people that are online can connect it. I sent it to you in a Word doc. The 8 transitory thoughts are material gain and loss, happiness and unhappiness, fame and insignificance, praise and criticism. Keep a level head. These are not subjects for your thoughts. This is from a very famous text called Letter to a Friend by Arya Nagarjuna. And Arya Nagarjuna is undoubtedly one of the greatest philosophers in Buddhism, and basically in the world, not just in Buddhism, but one of the greatest philosophers in the world, and is often known as the second Buddha. So this is a short quote from a much longer text, although it's not that long of a text. And these things, these 8 things, we wrapped up the last workshop with them very quickly, so I wanted to go into them in more detail, because you could say that these 8 pathways, when we say thoughts, we sort of think it's like one thought, but these are kind of 8 pathways our mind gets stuck in, or ping-pongs between. These 8 make up the dark forest, are one way to constitute the dark forest. So as we start to unpack them a little bit, you might see the things that you've been addressing within your dark forest, and maybe they don't, they might not fit in here at all, and that's totally reasonable. But chances are some of what you encounter in your dark forest are related to these thoughts. In the Western worlds, in my experience of it, which is whatever it is, we deal with anxiety with this sensation, and we have all these methods to cope with anxiety, but we sort of don't attend to anxiety that much unless it really starts to upset the status quo. whatever your status quo is. And when anxiety upsets the status quo, then it should be dealt with. Then you go to a therapist, or you don't, or you start drinking, or you start taking drugs, or you sleep all day long, or you fall into a depression, or there's some way the body-mind complex is offered to address anxiety. And one of the things I find so almost unbearable in its beauty about the Buddhist path, and any true spiritual tradition, I think, is that it is attending to every level of anxiety. It is seeking a way to relate very directly and intimately with every level of anxiety. And we put up with a lot of anxiety that we just numb ourselves out to. And it's like, it's fine, that's just the way it is, that's life, like, move on. And so these teachings are offering just to consider the potential to be completely free of anxiety. So we can just sort of consider what that might be. And there's some strong resistance we have in our mind to that possibility. It's almost insulting. I personally find it's almost insulting to really take in. I have a student at the university, and she's young. She's sophomore, so she's like 19. And we were talking about careers or something like that the other day, and she said this very extraordinary thing, and I want to share it right now because I think it relates, where she said, when I was in school, when I was younger, she said up to 8th grade, all of the language was about, what do you dream? What's your dream? And then she did this gesture and she said, when I hit 8th grade, and she said, then it was, what are you going to do with your life? What are you going to be? And I was like, oh my God. Like that, from like, what's your dream? To what are you going to do? Like, let's get serious now, right? And that quality in our being, which suddenly like comes like a steamroller over everything, it decreases our sensitivity so intensely, and we lose touch with the possibility to dream, to imagine for ourselves things that might be possible. We give up on so much. We give up on so much. And you don't have to give up on anything. You just have to be willing to actually face not giving up on it and what's required from that possibility. Okay, so we're seeking to eradicate anxiety completely in this path, and that's a big thing to take on. So we'll look at these 8 thoughts a bit. You could think about these as 8 pathways that separate us from our true nature. 8 pathways that separate us from other people. Jed was talking about walls. These are 8 pathways. These are 8 wall building machines. They just build walls constantly between us and other people, between us and our own heart. I chose this translation of transitory. Often these, and those of you that have been studying Buddhism know them as the 8 worldly thoughts. And we have to unpack a little bit what this idea of worldly is. So there's this idea that there's the worldly and the spiritual, right? There's this kind of dichotomy, this separation. What this is pointing to on a base level is that things that are worldly are transitory. They come, they stay for a while, and they fall away. This does not make them bad things. This doesn't mean worldly things are bad things. But we mistake the nature of worldly things, and we hope that they will stay forever. And thus we struggle with the world, because we're not encountering the nature of a worldly thing. Anything that is in form comes, stays for a while, and falls away. And the 8 worldly thoughts, the 8 transitory thoughts, you could say, are the way we fight with transitory things. We mistake them. Okay, and we relate to them poorly. We have a poor relationship to them. So things that are of the spirit, the idea, as I was speaking about earlier in the class, a pathway, an inner pathway of the spirit, is to encounter and touch base and have as your ground something that is not transitory, a part of your own nature that is unconditioned, that is eternal. You know, in the Christian tradition, we would say eternal life. That you contact eternal life within yourself and then relate to the world from that space. Okay? So often I just think we have some very violent thing where it's like some idea that we have to push the world away, or we move into spiritual practice and it's like the world is bad, I can't enjoy anything, I can't like anything, you know, I have to love everyone, but I shouldn't love anyone too much because then I'm going to desire them, or like there's all this crap that goes on in our mind. And that's really helpful to try to sort through, is like, what relationship do you have to the world, and is it in accord with the true nature of things? This is all we're talking about in all these workshops. Is the way we act in our lives in accord with the true nature of reality? Is the way we enact our life in direct relationship, in intimate, in union with the true nature of reality? And if it is not, we suffer. So when you are feeling suffering, it is pointing to the fact that you are not relating properly to reality. It's very simple. Of course, it's not so simple to unpack what reality actually is, to experience it completely. But it is possible for all of us to develop a very beautiful, deep, fulfilling, joyous relationship to our reality. And the thoughts that we're about to go into, the reason why they cause us pain is that we're not relating properly to them. Okay? So I'm not really personally, I'm really not interested in duality of good or bad, right or wrong, sinful, not sinful, all of that stuff. I find it very off-putting and violent and not so useful. But I am interested in really trying to understand if I can relate as meaningfully as possible to the other people in my life, to myself, to the nature of form itself, to everything that I'm encountering. How meaningfully, how intimately can I relate? And the promise, the offering of these teachings is that you might relate so intimately that you go into union with the reality of things, that you recognize yourself as that level of reality. There's no separation anymore between yourself and others. These are also other ways you can talk about these thoughts. Are they make a lot of terror. They're terror makers. They create competition. They create dullness in the mind. They're fantastic excuses to self-obsess on ourselves, and to feel badly about ourselves, and to obsess about how we feel badly about ourselves. Wonderful, wonderful opportunities for that. And they dissipate our power in the sense that they keep us frayed. So these 8 ways of thinking, which I promise I will eventually address, these 8 ways of thinking are all ways to stabilize externally. They're ways like, you know, Batman has that, not Batman, Spider-Man has that thing where he's like, boom, right? And it like flies out and it catches onto the thing. So these 8 transitory thoughts, pathways, and they're not just one thought, it's like 8 gazillion, billion, million thoughts you've probably had in the past hour, is like sending out these little spider webs and then going like, I'm holding myself, I'm held, I'm good, I'm stable. But because those things that you're throwing out and holding onto are transitory, they pass away, and then you feel like you fall. So then you send out more, but it's a constant process where you're throwing your little Spider-Man things out, it grabs on, and then the thing falls away. So you send out another, and it falls away. And it's totally exhausting. It's completely exhausting and sort of nauseating making. So when we can really see this, some part of our mind's like, you know, you can sit and try to meditate on the nature of reality, you know, till doomsday, but until you really like take in what you're really doing and take it personally, if you really look at it, actually your mind will drop it quite quickly. If you really take it personally, when you're like, so that's what I'm doing, that's not good for me. You go, that's it, I'm done. And, you know, and sometimes it's a habit, but you will have severed the root. You might still have the habit, and then you go, oh, here I am, I'm in that habit. I'm doing it again, and you might not be able to stop it, but some part of your mind is like, I know that this is not meaningful for me, So I'm going to watch it happen, I'm going to let it go, and then I'm going to make the effort not to do it again, you know? So let's look at these a bit and explore them for ourselves. I asked David during the break, I just said, what do you want me to say about the 8 worldly thoughts? And he said this extraordinary thing, so I want to share it with you. He said, I think you should say, so really this is David. He said, I think you should tell people that they should be completely sympathetic to the pathway of doing these things. Completely sympathetic to yourself. Completely compassionate to yourself in your relationship to these 8 pathways of your mind, and to know that you have very good reasons for doing these things. From the current self that you have, from your current understanding, you have very good reasons for doing these things. So total sympathy, and then he said, and you must be completely ruthless in severing your relationship to them. And that you have to hold those 2 simultaneously. Total sympathy, total compassion, and total ruthlessness. How do we do that? You know, that's because we ping pong one way or the other in ourselves. We're like, I know, I just screamed at you. I shouldn't have screamed at you. I'm so, I'm compassionate. I'm accepting myself right now. You know, and somewhere in that space, you lose the ruthlessness. It's like, and so it's okay for me to do that right now. You know, or we go into a space where we're very violent to ourselves and we're like, you're such a loser. Why did you do that again? You know, you shouldn't be doing that. Like, stop it, stop it. And of course, that doesn't create an energy that inspires you to stop it either. So you have to find some space, like the best parent ever, who from your, you know, your highest love, and this in Buddhism we would call this your inner teacher, your inner guru. You know, your inner teacher is like, I freaking love you. Stop. You know, like, I trust you, I believe in you, and I know why you're doing this, and it's time to stop, and to let that voice gain over. So the first pair is material gain and loss. So let's just start, and again, you can make a list of 1, and we'll just take a minute or so here, and just make a list of the material things in your life that take up your time thinking about. Without judgment. I'm not saying these are bad or good things, just noticing. On either side, what do I need to gain? What am I afraid of losing? Or what have I lost that I'm obsessing about? And again, I encourage you to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. They might be really petty things. Like, I just think about buying tank tops all day or something, you know, like, who knows? Okay. And, you know, if things continue to come to you that feel meaningful to write down, obviously, please do. So just noticing, you know, and this is the order that it's put in the ancient text, but obviously it's very prevalent in our society that we are brought up in a mythology where the idea is the more material things we have, the happier that we'll be. And I know this is not news to anyone, but it is so all-pervasive in our consciousness. It is so pervasive in the way we're living our life that it's very difficult for us to see how intensely that awareness is in us. That if we had something material, an object, even time, someone's time, more time of our own time, right? Anything material, that our happiness or our fulfillment would come from that. And to recognize, again, one, to just consider what type of being that idea relates to. That must be a being who is in extreme poverty. And do we want to perpetuate that sensation within ourselves, the sensation of poverty within ourselves? And if not, how would we want to be living? So again, material things are fine. It's like, you have things, you use them, we eat, it's helpful to be clothed. Even in LA, it gets a little chilly, and let alone if you live back east and you're in the blizzards, and maybe you have a job and you need a car and you have a place to live, and all these, it's all fine, it's fine. But we have to ask ourselves, what are we using them for? What's our relationship to them? What are we doing with them, right? And at what point does it go beyond using them to meet our vision in the world, and it goes to, if I had this, I would be happy. And it's like at that moment, we've crossed over into the transitory thought. We've crossed over into that like Spider-Man thing, where we go, if I got you, I'd be happy. And again, we have to be very sympathetic in terms of our relationship to this in ourself, because there's some deep self that has a sense like, if I had that, of course, when I start to say it, probably some part of your mind is like, well, I don't really think it's going to make me happy, right? I mean, like pretty quickly we're like, okay, like I know if I get like 5 new tank tops, it's probably not going to make me happy forever. Right? I mean, we become very smart very quickly in our minds if we look at it. And that's good to recognize that we can do that. But like before we get so smart, it's useful, and I ask you over the next month as you're kind of musing on these thoughts, to try to notice what's in the initial impulse, because chances are if you really look at it, in the initial impulse is like, this will permanently solve all my problems. Like the sensation is when it rises, if I had this, I would be stable. You can just think about that way. If I had that right now, I would be stable. And in fact, we literally, in the moment, we are stabilizing ourselves with that thought. Like we don't know what to do with our mind, we don't know what to do with ourselves, and so we're like, I'll stabilize on that thought. And it's like, well, what's the quality of the thought that you're stabilizing on? Is that what you want to stabilize yourself on? Really? To really ask yourself. And maybe it is, I don't know, maybe the material thing you're thinking about is like something you really do want to hold in your mind and work with, or maybe you're thinking about getting it because you're thinking about getting a gift for someone. That could be a nice thing, it's not so much the thing, and I'm not condemning the thought, it's just looking at your relationship to it. The other thing these pairings are speaking to is this kind of yo-yo experience that we have, where we get something that we like and we're like, yes! Like we had this young 10-year-olds come over our house. Actually, it was really enjoyable, but part of my mind was like, oh, that's it. Where and I had a hat. I had like a Michael Jackson hat in my closet, and I thought, oh, he'd really like this. I was sort of looking. It was Christmas time, and I didn't have a gift for him. They kind of came over, and I immediately thought I should give Elias something, and he was like, well, I was walking around the house, and I saw the hat, and I was like, Elias, and I took this down. He put it on, and you could see he really liked it, and I was like, Elias, you can have it, and he went, yes. It was like his whole being was like, it's mine, and that's fantastic, I mean, in a child it's fantastic. But we do that all the time, and it's like, and then our mind's like, I have it, it's mine, and it's like, it's never been yours. You don't own it, right? You don't own it like that. Can you say you're gonna have that hat or the shirt or your socks on your feet right now tomorrow? You can't say that, right? So it's lovely to enjoy things as we have them, enjoy them, but enjoy them knowing they are completely transitory and out of our control in the moment. And, you know, and that might release some of the sense of needing to collect more. It's like, it'll go away. And then, of course, on the other end, it's like, if the thing goes away, you know, when you've lost something that's really dear to you, that obsessing that the mind does on the thing that you've lost, in that it just distracts you, you know? It's just distracting you from your purpose. And so where are these coming from, you know, and how do we cut these? And I don't want to, in a way, talk about it too much because they come along later in the path. So really today I just want to sort of bring these up and encourage you to check out your relationship to these. And don't assume you have them. I mean, I'm telling you have them, but who knows? You know, you have to say, like, what is this? What are these things, these 8 transitory thoughts? Does my mind do this? You know, am I going like, oh, I really want that juice from Whole Foods. Oh, no, oh no, where did my iPod go? I lost my iPod like 2 weeks ago, you know? And it's like, it's amazing. I really, to be honest with you, I really don't care that I lost my iPod. However, I'm thinking about it. Like, it keeps going through my mind, you know? Mostly because I need it. I think I'm gonna teach class and I'm like, oh no, I don't have my iPod. But there's some, I can watch some little like pathway that'll go into where it's like, did someone steal my iPod? Where is is it in the closet? You know, and it's like, and then it's taking up my life thinking about an iPod. Who cares? You know? For me, I'm speaking about myself right now. So to just notice what your life is taken up thinking about. To really notice that. And are these things you want to think about? And if it is speaking to some space of poverty within yourself, the sense that if I stabilized on that material thing, I would feel richer, I would feel like I had some stability. To notice that it cannot come from out there, and it will always fail you. And to really, really, as David said, get ruthlessly clear on that. You have to be ruthless about that. That external thing will never, ever stabilize you internally. It cannot, it does not have the power. And if you give power to something outside of you that does not have the power, it will constantly fail you. Constantly. And this is, in this culture, we have this, right? We're like, we have everything, and depression rates are skyrocketing. Why? There's some feeling like, what's wrong with me? Why can't I stabilize? You know, because those things could never stabilize you. All right. Where does richness come from? You know, just to like open that question for yourself. Where does the real feeling of richness come from? Of feeling content all the time. Where does this come from? And there are thoughts about this, of course, in the spiritual traditions. And maybe you have them and you know them already, but I don't want to talk about them. I just think it's worth asking that question. What would it be like to feel wealthy within yourself all the time? To be that stable internally that you could walk around life with an open hand, and things will come in and things will get taken out, and you're happy. It's a beautiful orange. Oh, orange isn't there anymore. Oh, it's a nice pen. I can use it to write. Oh, the pen's gone. But just, what would that feel like to be able to move through like that? Because most of us are not moving through like that. We're like that, or this anxiety, these 8 thoughts of anxiety, this grabbing motion. So the next pair is happiness and unhappiness. And this is particularly related to sensual feeling. So this is a way that we kind of cover and numb out our relationship to our fear of pain, physical pain. And again, we often jump to the intense place of it, but we're talking about any level of anxiety, any level of physical uncomfortness. To note how that's taking up time in our mind. So just take a moment and again, for yourself, write down what are the things where we seek sensual gratification outside of ourselves for you? What are the things you reach towards when you're not feeling well that you think will comfort you or bring you happiness? And again, I really encourage you to look at the things that you really encounter on a daily, almost hourly basis maybe. And then, just check out your list as you're looking, or the one thing you have on your list, or whatever it is. And, you have to ask yourself honestly, does it do the job? Does it always do the job? And how long does it last? There's something quite extraordinary that the idea of an inner spiritual path, vital, an inner vitality that is not physical, not sense-based, and not mental, which is also a type of sense, something beyond our current understanding of consciousness or mind. That we might experience a ground of joy that is different than pleasure and different than what we think of as happiness. So all of these things that we have, like everything else, they come, they stay, they spike for a little while, and then they fall away. And again, this is the nature of form. So it's not to say don't ever experience whatever this is, orange tangelo thing, cutie, or a blueberry, or your lover, or a beautiful day, but the question is, how are we relating to that? Are we relating to it as something truly transitory, truly passing? Or are we seeking something permanent in that relationship, in that encounter? And again, if we're at any level of our being, if we are seeking something permanent in that, we will suffer, because it cannot provide that for us. And we must get very clear on that. Again, this is where the ruthlessness comes in. You can have the sympathy in the sense of like, I don't feel good right now. I'm sympathetic to that, and I would like to feel better. I would like to figure out how to feel better. And but then you have to really look and say, is this thing going to provide what I'm really looking for, which is some lasting sense of comfort? And if I'm looking for that in any physical experience, will I ever receive that actually? Can I? Is my form not changing all the time? Right? My form is changing all the time. So what would it be to experience a ground, a mind beyond the current mind that is one of joy, which then you can relate to other things? Again, a deep self-stabilization that is a sweet stabilization, not a stabilization of anger or violence. And where would that come from? To open up that question in yourself. Where have we ever even, we, us, you individually, have you experienced a state of joy or comfort that is something beyond sensual? And probably everyone in this room has at some point, and maybe forgotten, or it passed so quickly, or it seemed like a fluke. But if you've experienced it for a millisecond, you could extend it for eternity if you understand how to create the causes for it. Okay? So we'll go into all these as we go on through the workshops, but right now we're just opening up this realm of investigation. And starting to see, again, another thing that the sensual happiness and unhappiness, I'm so happy, I feel so good, keep massaging me, please keep massaging me. Or like, I feel horrible, and I'm seeking for something outside to get rid of this pain, which is really saying, I want to numb myself. I'm trying to numb myself out, And how can we possibly be sensitive to the deepest parts of our being when we're spending a lot of time numbing ourselves? This just doesn't make any sense. So the next pairing is fame and insignificance. And I just want to give a little context for this, and as you think about it, of course, you'll come to it in your own way. But in terms of us, how we might just write some quick thoughts down about it right now. So I think often when we think of fame, we immediately go to like famous, like a movie star or Lady Gaga, or like people who are sort of these like mega stars, right? And you could say that's like the nth of it, right? But to track back, and maybe some of you are hoping to be Lady Gaga. Possible. I know most of my students are in the university. So what is this idea that somehow, if you had dominance, so just stay with me for a moment. The impulse of fame, it seems to me, is that your image dominates. Your image or your idea, your voice, your song, your book, your whatever, your movie, dominates everyone else's view. Does that seem to make sense to people? Okay. I've really been thinking about this one over the past month, so this is the one that for me was sort of revelatory. So then I was tracking that back and thinking, like, I don't often think about being Lady Gaga or at that level. I'm not, so I was like, how am I having this thought all the time? How do I relate to this transitory thought? How am I distracting myself and numbing myself out and causing myself anxiety with this? And it appeared to me then that it's any movement of my mind where I'm seeking to have the upper hand or like prove my point. Like even in this class, like I hope you're all like taking my view of this right now. That can go into that pathway, to go into that stream of having some kind of fame, right? Where my image dominates, my view dominates, my idea dominates. And in the spiritual tradition, this becomes what's called dogma. So you could say, like, fame, the idea of fame is dogma. That somehow you will dominate and stabilize by having the idea in the room or in your own mind. So I personally can watch this happen in my own mind, where it's like I'm trying to stabilize by dominating some idea in my mind instead of being okay with the sort of confusion or destabilization that's going on. Okay? And of course, then the other end of it is this terror that comes when you feel insignificant. Where maybe, I say something in class and all of you raise your hand like, that doesn't make any sense, and you're totally wrong. And then like some part of the mind goes into terror, that it's been separated. So we fear this separation, okay? But to see that with all of these afflictions, it's also helpful, another way you can think about it is to see how they're not working the way you think they are. So we fear insignificance, we fear loneliness, we fear being separated and sort of disappearing, because we don't have any true internal self-image. We haven't encountered the true image of ourself, which actually is imageless. We're grasping onto images, and then we're trying to dominate and reproduce our image until it covers the whole earth and stabilize it with that image somehow. And stop it. Mega fame, stop. Right? And of course, everything's moving, so we can't stabilize it like that. So that fear of insignificance, it's so interesting. It's like, I feel like I want to connect with other people. I want other people to know me. And then the impulse is to dominate them with your image. So then you're just seeing yourself again. You're not really seeing them, and you're not really relating to them. It's like, so wear a t-shirt of me. You know, put my song on your radio, put my thought into your mind, put my words into your mind. And then you're not actually relating to the other person, which is what you feared when you felt insignificant. You felt like you had no one to relate to, right? So they don't work. You see these cycles, it's like, totally doesn't work. So just thinking for a moment for yourself, times in your life, this one might be a little harder. It's not quite as direct with the others that you can almost go to material things very quickly, but this is more of the mind. To consider situations in your life where you habitually try to dominate the situation or try to have fame in the situation. If the word fame works for you, go for it. Where you try to have the upper hand somehow. Or another way of saying it is you just want to be right. You just want to feel right in that situation. And these are not rational, okay? In case you haven't noticed. These are really not rational thoughts. They come out of a much more deep place in us. Or maybe it's already happened within the past 5 minutes. Another thing with this particular thought, and please, I encourage all of you to really take these in. You know, you can't begin to encompass these in 45 minutes of addressing them. You can get an initial relationship, but you know, you want to have a long-term marriage of understanding with these thoughts, with your own mind, and not just a cup of coffee, you know, a cup of joe one day and go on, because then they'll continue to dominate your mind. But to see how very violent this, all of them actually have intense violence within them, and of course they produce all kinds of other afflictions like jealousy, greed, all kinds of other things that make us feel like we don't have enough, and you know, we don't have enough. So, but this one in particular, of this sense of dominating and dogma, how very violent that is. You know, that there's like an inner tyrant in each of us, an inner dictator that's like seeking to take over the world. And again, if you don't deal with that dictator, it will take over the world. It will take over your mind, for sure. You know, so you have to identify it and check in, and have a sympathetic, kind relationship to it and a ruthless relationship to it. And figure out how these are enacting themselves in your life. And I just, you know, hint, because sometimes even within myself I can see the immediate reaction where it's like, well, I do that, but I don't do that. You know, it's like, well, I look at the 8, and I think I have some relationship to 2 of them, but the rest of them I don't really do. You know, there's like some part of our mind that does that. And to just open the potential that we're all doing all of them, pretty much all the time. And you know, and not to say that's a bad thing. These are then powerful catalysts for transformation. Okay, so the last one is the pairing of praise and criticism. And of course, we're seeking some What are we seeking? You know, this is, again, the thing to keep touching base to. What are we seeking here, or what are we trying to cover, you know? What is the fear? The fear of being unworthy somehow, the fear that we're useless, a useless person, a stupid person, an ugly person, a bad person, or something like that. And you can just think to yourself, how, you know, if you're convinced, really convinced within yourself that you're crap, it doesn't really matter what anyone else says. And if you're convinced within yourself that you're great, it also really doesn't matter what anyone else says. So if we keep seeking to stabilize on external things, we have no power. We're totally disempowered. And to just notice, is that the way you want to continue to be? And if not, what shifts will you have to make? So, you know, just take a moment and think about what areas of your life you really seek someone else's good praise. You know, maybe it's sexually, maybe it's in your work, maybe it's in the way you look, or I don't know, or the way you bake a cake, or, you know, we do them in so many ways that are so small we miss them. So to think about what kind of energy we offer others when we do things, but we do them in a way that we're seeking praise. And again, are we really relating? You know, another way to look at these 8, which I mentioned a while back, is to see the way they separate us from other people. So when we're enacting something and we're just hoping the other person is going to say, like, good job, we're not really relating to them. We're just, all of these, they're very incestuous. I would call them the 8 incestuous thoughts. That would be my translation, is that they're just recreating yourself over and over, recreating this sort of monster me that goes on. And of course, then we obsess about, everyone in this room could say great teaching, and if Geneva's like, I don't know, that part on the 8 world thoughts was pretty boring, you know, it's like that my mind would go into that pathway the whole way home, like, why would she say that? You know, I spent all this time on this teaching. I'm like, you know, and just noticing the way we give our power to the outside world. We just keep giving our power away to the outside world, to this transitory space that's moving. And I don't know, you know, have you ever had the experience where someone upsets you and you're like obsessing on it, and they just don't, you know, you encounter them maybe a week later, they don't even remember. They don't even know what they said, you know? Or like you say, I can't believe you said that to me, and Geneva's like, no, I really liked the teaching. I was overstimulated, so it was good for me to be bored in that moment or something. You know, it's like, they were really, you know, they were just offering something genuine from themselves. And, you know, you see, it's not, you don't have access to other people's experience like that. So, so just checking these out. And for those of you that have been studying Buddhism, I'll just say, and maybe this is meaningful for other people too, if you have a background maybe in Christianity or other, well, almost every spiritual tradition has some sort of figure, some vision that you're moving towards. It's sort of necessary to have a vision to meet. But if you take these 8 worldly thoughts to their nth, it's sort of our fantasy, our ultimate fantasy of being a Buddha or Christ or something like that, you know, where you, Christ after Christ is risen, where you have everything, you're like totally decked out in heaven, right? So you've got all material goods forever, for eternity. You feel awesome. Sensually, you feel awesome all the time, right? You're in bliss. You're in some heavenly bliss all the time. You are a world teacher, right? We use this, like, everyone has your view. You are Buddha, you are Christ, everyone is Christ, or everyone is Buddha, okay? And everyone loves you, right? You love everyone, everyone loves you. So it's really interesting to see, like, what would it mean, again, I say this particularly to some people, a lot of the people in the room have been really studying Buddhism, and, to check base with yourself about what your vision of being enlightened or realized will be. And is it just the hyper version of the 8 worldly thoughts? So that your whole practice is just obsessing actually on like the gigantic fantasy of the 8 worldly thoughts, of the 8 transitory thoughts. Ruthless. I'm going into the ruthless part right now. And to say, like, it must be pointing towards something. So it's not to say, like, and that's a bad thing, but how are you relating to that? And do you really think that that's what it's going to be like? And to remember that the Dharma, what is reality? Dharma is just another term for reality. The teachings are Dharma, reality. Reality is something beyond the world. It is beyond what the worldly mind can conceive of. And again, this seems impossible to even talk about. It is some self beyond your current self. So you've got to hold this impossibility in your mind as you try to create your vision of where you're going in your life. One, to recognize that that vision is, of course, coming from your current self. It is related to your current mind. And to have the possibility that you could go beyond that current mind. Otherwise, you're only creating within the circumstance or the globe of your current self. Is that making sense? It's like you're just taking the little cursor on the computer and expanding your current self. But we're actually talking about not doing anything with the current self, finding a completely different self. Going beyond that current understanding, okay? Which we'll talk about in the next session. So we'll take a break, but that pathway from this to that, we call grace. And there's nothing for us to do about it. There's everything for us to do about it and nothing for us to do about it simultaneously, okay? But more importantly, just to check out as you're sort of like going through your spiritual practice, and thinking about these spiritual things, are you just expanding these kind of 8 worldly places, I hope I'm gonna feel really awesome. I hope everyone likes me. I hope, I'm totally everywhere and, I have everything I need. And then some part of yourself is like, and I want to give that to other people too. But I hope I have that. Because then I can give it to other people too, after I have it. First I should have it. Because I don't want to not have it, because then what would I do, right? So do we have the, what's it called, basket? Yeah. So we're going to take a break. We'll take another, was the 20-minute break enough for people? Is that okay? So we'll take a 20-minute break, and don't open this now, unless you want to. Of course, you don't have to do what I say. But I invite you that you'll have a better experience if you don't open it now. Let's see. Actually, let's take 25 minutes. So I'd like you to take a 20-minute break, and somewhere within your break, take 5 minutes to find someplace quiet somewhere to read this, slowly and gently. And just see what's there for you. If you want to read it a few times, read it a few times. If you want to speak it out loud, speak it out loud. If you want to do some writing on it, do some writing on it. Totally up to you. But please do that quietly in some place where you can really settle yourself. So 25-minute break, 20 minutes to really break for yourself. And again, I ask you to consider the mind of the room. We went through the middle chunk, which is also often hard to go through, and your energy might have dipped a little bit. So how are you going to use this time, this break, to nourish yourself, to re-energize yourself, and then we'll have about an hour when we come back, okay? So just really be responsible with your own being and how you want to be with this practice here. This is the poem. Yeah, I think I put it within this section that when I emailed to you in the dark. Yeah.